Hello and welcome back to On the Brink. I'm Nick Carter. This episode is brought to you by Fireblocks. More about them later in the episode. Today I'm sitting down with Paul Sztorc, one of the most anticipated episodes we've ever done on this show. I've received countless requests for it. Here it is, and it doesn't disappoint. So for those of you who don't know, Paul Sztorc is one of the most prolific and long-running thinkers in the Bitcoin space. I think I became aware of his work in 2014, and some of his old posts have held up really, really well. We actually discussed that in the episode. Paul is quietly very influential in the Bitcoin space, certainly to me specifically. I've learned a lot from him. He's also something of a critic of sort of Bitcoin development culture and prevailing ideas among Bitcoiners. He's certainly not afraid to tread a different path, and that's what I really like about him. So in this episode specifically, we talk about his Drivechain project, which has code that's deployed, and his BIPs 300 and 301. The idea of Drivechains is to facilitate blind merged mining so that Bitcoin block space can become more useful and abundant while providing more fees to the miners. Paul has a very definite point of view on this and certainly expresses concern over Bitcoin's security budget and the trajectory of that. And this is, of course, one of the most pitched debates in the Bitcoin community, although I think people are oftentimes afraid to make their feelings known on this. Paul certainly isn't, and has a very clear perspective on the matter. This is a highly informative episode. If you're not familiar with Paul's work, please read it. It's incredibly good, and even his posts from 2014 and 15 are very prescient, hold up very, very well. I'm including them in the show notes. Listen to the episode, give his work a read. Let's dive into it.
Brought down by bad mortgage investments, Lehman, which has 25,000 employees, will be liquidated.
The federal government loans American International Group, AIG, $85 billion.
This is a different kind of market, and the Fed is asleep.
The federal government is stepping in to stabilize Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two mortgage giants that have been threatened by the housing crisis.
The Bank of England has pumped £75 billion more into Britain's ailing economy with a new round of quantitative easing.
You print a couple $1 trillion, and all of a sudden people start to worry. So out of this worry, we have something called the Bitcoin.
So I'm here with Paul Sztorc. Just learned the correct pronunciation. I got that wrong, but I had that wrong for 7 years.
Well, that's a common that's a common thing to get. I get all kinds of things. I remember in high school, you would get everything, and then all my friends would know how to pronounce it, so the teachers would say some random thing, and then we would all just go along with it. Well, welcome to the studio, aka my apartment. This is actually the first podcast I've recorded here. Oh, it's a cool apartment. I'll tell you that. Thank you. I'm gonna keep that in the show so everybody knows. So you used to live in Miami, because I remember I saw you very recently, yeah. And now you are no longer in Miami. Yeah, I'll be back though. I mean, I planned on doing like a 51% of the time here type of a thing. I just haven't gotten around to kind of coming back, but I think it's great here, and I think that if you're considering moving somewhere, this is a pretty good choice. Just easier to live here, great weather, great taxes, rent is affordable. Yeah, places are nice. People are having fun. I do like it. I mean, you're going the opposite direction. Everybody's coming and you've left, but we can forgive you for that. All right, so you're actually the most requested guest for this podcast. Really? Did you know that? No. Yeah, so because I've read your work many times and obviously cited it. Thanks. And I often refer to you as the Steely Dan of Bitcoin. Oh my God! Does this make sense to you? It doesn't make. I mean, I know who Steely Dan is, but I'm waiting for it to click into place as to what you mean by that. Actually, I think it was Tor de Meester that first described, and so I stole that from Tor. So basically, not to be too much of a sycophant here, but so Steely Dan is beloved by musicians. So like by other musicians. That's the angle. So I'm like the expert's expert or something. Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's so nice of you to say. Yeah, I try to only write about things that I think. See, what bothers me is I don't want to write something that's just like something that everyone else will say. I think that's horrible. But that's like what gets, that's like what gets a lot of attention. If you just reiterate tell the audience what they want to hear, you just go up there and you say, taxation is theft or whatever, or like a Lightning Network is DeFi on Bitcoin, or you say some
play
funny
the
little
hits.
phrase like
play
that.
the hits. Yeah.
Play the hits, right? Exactly. Just go up there and play "Don't Stop Believin'," and the audience will love it.
There's something to be said for that. But
if they don't hear "Don't Stop Believin'" at your concert, where are they going to hear it?
So you take a different tack. I mean, I just thinking back, you measuring decentralization post was very influential to me. I still talk about it. Proof of work versus proof of stake, where you describe proof of stake as a veiled proof of work. I don't know if that was the exact expression you used, but it was compelling to me. I think it was right. So actually, that's where we're going to start.
Held up really well. I think.
So that was going to be my question.
Okay, what's the question?
Are you satisfied with how your work has aged from 2014?
Yeah, great question.
7 years now.
Yeah, it's a long time. I think measuring decentralization is one where I sort of part of that was about there was obviously the scaling debate, and then I kind of wanted to make it possible for both of the two different sides to make some kind of progress in the conversation. And what was really weird about that is both sides sort of endorsed it, but they also sort of like ignored it or something, I want to say, because that was supposed to be kind of like maybe a gift to the small blocker side and say, you have now this measurable thing that you can say that increasing the block size will make it just harder to run a full node. And that's what the whole frame should be. It should just be, makes it harder to run a full node. What are you going to do? And so that was supposed to, but they were just kind of like, everyone just kind of it was already so dogmatic at that point that they were just like, those people are evil. And that it kind of didn't make, it kind of didn't really succeed in helping either of the two kind of combatants. But it was weird because the audience liked it. I think that one held up like super, super well. I think that is the right thing to do. Is if you can't measure something, it like doesn't exist. I think so. If people were talking about all this stuff and they were saying, "Oh, if we increase the block size, it will harm the decentralization of Bitcoin," but it was just this abstract concept, and that it made it impossible to have a conversation or even really to think about what was happening. And I thought that was so annoying because it was like these people are just talking. It's like people talk about justice or something, and it's just like so annoying. And it's like if you had something, it literally comes down to a number. And so I thought that one was really, really great. I think the sort of nothing is cheaper than proof of work about proof of stake just being proof of work. That I think that also held up really, really, really well. In particular, I at the time convinced most people, I remember convincing like Jake Kwan and like Vlad Zamfir, like in the comments section, that I brought them around to that point of view. But then they kind of kept on, working on proof of stake.
Well, yeah,
right?
I didn't cure them.
I went to Consensus in New York City and I saw Vlad Zamfir and I came up to him and I was like, people were talking to him. I was talking to him. And I was like, yeah, but didn't you agree with me in my article? And he said, yes. And I was like, so why are you still working on proof of stake at all? And he kind of like had no answer to that. It was very kind of silly.
Why does the alchemist stop trying to make gold?
Right, exactly. In particular, that essay was really about like, even if you could get proof of stake to work, which itself was always going to be this huge challenge. And as you can see, they constantly push it back. The Marty Bent thread or whatever, they constantly fail to get it to work. But the point of that article was like, even if you got it to work, it would be useless. It wouldn't achieve a positive outcome in terms of this whole waste thing. So yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about that still to this day. But yeah, I don't know. I think those two are pretty good.
So I feel like we could do an episode on, frankly, either one of those. Maybe we're gonna have to do a series or something. You told me that you like to do 4-hour episodes.
Yeah, so. I know. It ends up happening a lot.
So okay, measuring decentralization. Do you remember Balaji Srinivasan's blog post on that?
Yeah, it was horrible, wasn't it? No offense to him, but it was like that was the one where I want to make sure I'm remembering it right.
Yeah,
he had 6 metrics.
Yeah,
and then he sort of like took some bizarre like aggregation of them or something. What was it like? What did he even do?
He called it the Nakamoto coefficient. It was something like,
I was shocked.
He took the Gini of a bunch of different metrics.
Yeah.
I didn't like it either. I like Balaji actually a lot. He's been on the show, but I thought that was a mess.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. Yes. No, and
because again, they were very arbitrary.
About him. I think he's like, I kind of have like sort of a love-hate relationship. I think he gets a lot of really important things right, and then sometimes I just have no idea what he's talking about. But that's an example because why? That's an example of exactly the kind of writing that I don't like, or a type of analysis that I don't like, where he like seemed to draw on. First of all, he made the common mistake about when you have the data, you just use the data. So like he had data on those things, and he's like, and that's similar with the Gini coefficient. He was like, this thing exists in the world, and we can take out a calculator and use it. So all the best statistics, and I used to be a statistician professionally, and all the best statistics are ones that actually you just invent for the purpose of solving your problem. So you never want to roll your own crypto, but I think that all the great statistics are, because you need to have like an idea of what you're doing first.
Right.
And then people say, oh, well, we're going to use like linear regression or whatever. We're going to use correlation or something. And they just they saw someone else do that, and they are this is the Steely Dan thing is coming back. But it's like, I think that was an example of just chaos, because he picked those things. Many of them had no real relation to anything. And there was
like
no
the number of nodes.
There was no thought
like
behind
that.
it, right?
Yeah.
And I critiqued that specifically in my post about the number of nodes. So one guy who could be, JP Morgan or whatever, one person could just spin up like 10 million nodes on Monday, and then on Tuesday they could shut half of them off, and then your metric is going to be like whipsawing, but nothing actually happened. So it's like, isn't that an enormous disqualifier for that? So I kind of hated that. I thought it was, but luckily for me, a lot of other people also hated it. So
it wasn't influential.
Like mind.
Yeah, I call it the pie chart theory of decentralization.
Because they always put up that
they
thing.
Get the pie chart. I think BitShares really pioneered that.
Dan Larimer was into that. he was
loved the pie chart.
And then his big thing was he was going to take like the log base 2 of it or something. Like that was like supposed to be a big improvement or something.
When you the marketing for these proof of stake chains would be like, we have 21 validators, and Bitcoin only has 3.
Yeah, they say that's horrible. Yeah, because that's a lot of people say that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you in the audience if you're still saying that today. I mean, what can we say to cure them of that? Like the relationship between the miner who has invested possibly millions of dollars, but at least they have hardware that cannot be used for anything else. And then the pool, and they can switch pools on a dime. Yeah. And they can very easily monitor the pool for doing anything that they do themselves.
They do switch pools, by the way.
They are very distant, both of the pools.
Yeah.
As they should. So which pool they're at is completely a formality, ladies and gentlemen. It has very little, whether they're with one pool or another pool makes no. All the pools mostly do the exact same thing. It's very easy to, if a pool did the wrong thing, they would be kicked out of the system. So hopefully, if you listen to this podcast, stop saying that.
Yeah. So my view on proof of stake is that like basically it can be made to work. Like there are proof of stake blockchains in the wild that have been running. Like Tezos has been going for a couple of years. I mean, EOS has been running. I just think of them as standard like financial institutions which have shareholder governance, basically. That's how I think about them. And so I don't think of them as particularly transformative. I think of them as a resumption of like the prior system, basically. If A is, do you agree with that? And then B, like, do you think the market is just doesn't care enough?
That's a very good question. I certainly think a proof of work is more like an industrial process, and proof of stake is more like this sort of weird legal type brand thing that like relies a lot on which domain names you have registered. And I definitely am sort of surprised at the number of proof of stake coins that work and just didn't burst completely into flames. I was a little surprised by that, but I do think it is a byproduct of people. First of all, the underdog has an advantage because everyone wants to work together to take over the top spot, and then they'll turn on each other, but not until then.
Well, actually, if you paid attention, they totally have been turning on each other this year.
I bet. Well, that was like the Ethereum, like the Binance Smart Chain,
Solana,
exactly.
Avalanche,
It's just been, there's
they're
always
all fighting.
It's like a Russian dolls of like. See, that's the thing is, that's your second question is very important, because I think the idea of proof of work is that it is a kind of this like shield or defense system. I think maybe even you were saying that or something. I don't remember who was saying it, but it was like it's like having a big wall around your city, but then if no one tries to invade, it makes it look like the wall is pointless.
It was a waste.
So, and you know, obviously that's not the way people make decisions about whether or not they should build walls, and which is because they shouldn't, because the wall could be a deterrent. But yeah, I do wonder. It's possible to tell a weird story where you say Bitcoin needed to have proof of work so that it would survive, because the whole point of Bitcoin's design is a reaction to like Liberty Reserve and these other things. So there was just one server, and it was not only very cheap, but it was just very straightforward to just shut the entire thing off. So you had like Liberty Dollar, Liberty Reserve, right? DigiCash,
eGold too.
eGold, exactly. So that was like the big reason to switch to proof of work, because proof of work says that every node can be a server now. No one needs to have any particular like a trump card on what the truth is. So that was the whole design problem of Bitcoin. And then they opened the door to like just cryptocurrency, or just having the idea of having private keys that control little UTXOs or a little whatever you want to call it in the other coins that don't have UTXO model. But they kind of opened that door up, and then then maybe it's like the government can't tell the difference, or no, the public can't really tell the difference, and so as a result, they just how can they close down only some and not others? So then it is possible that maybe you needed to have proof of work to open the tip of the spear, and then afterwards proof of work is a complete waste of time.
Right.
That's a shocking thought, but I think that it is possible.
So proof of work was the dynamite that blew open the Overton window.
Exactly,
and then
yes.
Proof of stake
the Overton window.
Through.
That's a very good way of, that's what I was searching for. The idea that it would just, like, how Lyft and Uber were like technically illegal for a really long time, but they're just, so it ended up being so popular that in practice it just, in general, I think people, whatever the sort of law is or whatever the formal rules are, is not as important as what is in people's brains.
Yeah.
And like a culture of a place makes an enormous difference.
Yeah.
And so proof of work maybe changed the culture, but then you wonder, like, is it pointless? And then you get with stuff like, like Binance Smart Chain or whatever, you're kind of like, people are taking that to the absolute edge where they say, but that's one of the reasons why, among other things, I advocate a less decentralized scalability sidechain, because I just think you have to be able to win in either world. Mm-hmm. In a world where it's not going to matter how decentralized the coin is, well, then you can take advantage of the sidechain, and then in a world where it does matter, then all of the centralized projects will be killed out. So another great analogy is like a kind of bacteria or something. Like if you put in antibiotics, then it really helps to be an antibiotic resistant bacteria. But if you don't, then you just need to be whatever bacteria is like spreading the fastest or whatever. So all that, I'm not familiar with how they achieve that bacterial resistance, but it must come with some trade-off, right? Otherwise every bacteria would be.
So on the waste question, this is Congress is going to have a hearing on whether this is great. There's a chance that I'm there, and I'll just tell them, read Paul Sztorc's essays, guys. Come on, he wrote it in 2015. We've had time to read it. So proof of stake is if it consumes societal resources, if it consumes capital and it mobilizes it, that means capital can't be used for other stuff. Is that and that other stuff could be like building nuclear power plants? Is that a reasonable argument to push back at this, like, proof of work is wasting energy kind of thing?
Well, I think, I'm not sure how persuasive it will be, because it's sort of abstract. Even what I was saying about the fact that you've folded up capital, and so then the fewer projects to build a better future can be taken advantage of in the proof of stake world. Even that was me trying to go to like an absolute like limit. I think in practice there will be even more other forms of proof of stake. Like the proof of stake waste will take on even other forms, like people trying to denial of service attack the other stakers, or people go back in time and they get old keys that people don't own now, but they did in the past, and then they try to rewrite the chain from there, which is computationally basically free. They just have to then get whatever their strategy is for beating the whatever, they have to get the exchanges like off the network. But then that's possible. You can do that with like denial of service or just whatever it is. You can put the network in some kind of dilemma. So I think the waste is mostly, as I try to get into the piece, like fundamentally the driver of the waste is just the fact that the blocks have a certain amount of value, and the block is just worth $10 million. So people are just going to be fighting over the block, and they're going to fight. You could design something that's really, really perfect. I mean, I think you probably can't, but the point is, if in proof of work they're bidding with energy up to the $10 million amount, and with proof of stake they'll just be bidding with whatever else they think will increase their chances of. So it's the fact that the coin is worth so much that drives the waste. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's proof of stake or proof of work,
right,
or anything else. But again, I don't think it'll be persuasive at all. Those people are they've got their story that they want to sell, and they're going to go for that. I'm not sure what to do at this point about the energy FUD type people, you know?
Well, it's all tied into this sort of Malthusian idea that just consuming energy is a sin.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think the real thing is to just try to retake the offensive. There was a book called The Ultimate Resource that you may be familiar with. I don't remember. I think the guy's name was Paul Simon? He took the other side of the Ehrlich bet.
Yeah, you know, I knew or know Paul Ehrlich.
Oh, really?
He's a family friend. So, yeah, I've read
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it's okay. I mean, look, I disagree with the man.
Yeah. So that's the point. The guy who won the bet wrote a book, The Ultimate Resource, and he argues that, and I think correctly, and the book is like that none of our resources are meaningfully finite.
Yeah, because everything got more deflationary. We got better at pulling.
And constantly we get better at it. And each of the things that we do now requires fewer resources. There's another great book, The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch, who's still alive. Those are two books that they just take this view that there's no like... The right thing to do is to do more with less.
Yeah.
It's not... We don't have to all just like stop enjoying... our style, stop enjoying our energy, stop enjoying our whatever.
And you know, the incredible thing is the bringing up that early 1970s alarmism about resources is absolutely correct, because what happened was, so Paul Ehrlich wrote this book, The Population Bomb. This is for the benefit of our listeners, and basically the idea was like the global south is going to starve because we don't have enough food. We're not good enough at making food. Then we like discovered high yield GMO rice strains, and like, you know, basically we figured out how to feed like 15 billion people if we wanted. And all of his predictions were wrong about completely wrong. Starvation. But you know what happened in the meantime was, like, driven by these academics, Western, like, international financial institutions, and actually the policy establishment made it a cornerstone of their foreign policy to encourage, like, effectively eugenics in the third world. This is the part that people don't know.
I don't know this either.
So this is a crazy story. So the U.S. at the highest levels,
the stupid population bomb,
made it so they this book infected everyone's brains, and then they were like, okay, we need to convince India to stop making so many people right now. And so then there were these massive sterilization campaigns in India. Indira Gandhi actually she won all these prizes, and all of this sterilization was connected to aid dispersed by like the World Bank and stuff.
This is a giant nightmare.
It was incredible.
But I'm not surprised though, because here's the thing: is when people start to go wrong, like, you know what I mean? Like, to get an argument right, every part of it has to be correct. And if you flip one thing, is multiplied by -1 or whatever, and the whole argument, you just become a crazy person. But But yeah, that's too bad.
And like something like 6 million people in India was sterilized due to this.
Well, and then who knows about, like, that makes me think about the China's one-child policy or something.
Completely related, and that's a demographic disaster now on the other side.
Yes, to just breathe, because this is so important that every single person alive needs to understand this. There's this naive view, and then there's the correct view. The naive view is that you just take all the resources that we know that we have now, like in some Excel sheet or something, and then the current rate of usage, and then you just multiply. You just say, well, run out. We're going to run out in, because it sounds incredible for someone to come onto a podcast and say none of our resources are finite in any meaningful, like, that sounds crazy if you think about it, because that's outside of most people's experience. Someone has, if you have, you go to the store and you buy 4 bananas or something, you think, it's only a matter of time before these bananas run out. And then, but this is a very naive view, is to just say this is the oil we know about, and we use X amount, per person per year, and then you just multiply like that. That's not actually how anything works in practice. In what the real view is that what humans do every day is, many of them, not, some just go to work and do what they're told, but many of them, they look around for a problem to solve, and they look for the most important problem. They don't solve the 10th most important problem to them, or the 40 millionth most important. They look at what is the most important problem today. They solve that problem. And that's why all the big problems get a lot of attention. They get solved. And so, things do not... Things have been getting better on an extremely continuous way for the last, basically forever, but especially over the last 300 years or so. Things have been constantly getting better. And I have one more thing that I have to add, which is the reason people adopt the naive view is because the correct view, it relies on people creating knowledge. So it's sure we don't know today how the people in 2050 are going to get their energy. And so you could say, well, maybe we'll just stop inventing, new energy technology. But you could also say maybe we'll invent the best energy technology ever, and people will be laughing at this conversation. The point is you have no idea either way. And we've been inventing things ever since we got here on this planet. So there's plenty of room for more inventions. And it's this idea that you don't have the knowledge. But if we don't have the knowledge of 2050, if we did, we would just switch all that energy to today. Right. So, but yeah, I hope that this is a sad thing. I think that is, you're right though. I think that's fundamentally the proof of work conversation is mostly actually trapped in that completely different thing. It's not actually a conversation between blockchain engineers about consensus.
Of course not. And you could have the same conversation about gold. Gold extraction uses probably more energy than Bitcoin, and it can't be cleaned up because you're using diesel trucks and stuff like that. It's a type of argument that no one else makes. Like, how much energy does the NFL use? Like, we don't do this with any other thing where we say, all of the energy they used to make Q-tips. Well, we're cursed because it's easy to tally it up for Bitcoin.
Yes, I think that's the reason. It's the same thing with the data is there, so they just say, well.
And Bitcoin's new, and not a lot of people use it. So that's exactly. And I was on a run this morning. I was looking at the cruise ships out there, and I was thinking to myself, well, what percentage of the Earth's population has been on a cruise ship? Probably not a big percent. But these things are belching like sulfur into the oceans, like disgusting filth, basically killing the manatees and the dolphins.
Yeah, well, then it's the other thing. It's like rich America, sort of like Americans go on a cruise ship. So it's like skiing versus boxing or something. There's all these like.
Well, I guess the thing is like your New Yorker columnists that are like criticizing Bitcoin's energy. They're probably not on cruise ships either, frankly. So.
Well, you're right. They may be trapped in the Ehrlich self-hatred spiral or whatever.
But here's connecting the thread, and I know people get mad when I do this, from this like eugenic campaign from the 70s, which was very much colonial, and it was like the West basically saying to the rest of the world, don't use our resources, don't have kids. It's the same thing with the energy. If you listen to the Glasgow COP2 or whatever, did you pay attention to this thing?
I didn't.
Well,
I don't know how much more it can take.
It was the most exciting development in energy concern trolling environmentalist.
I think maybe I heard some of it on Twitter. And
so basically, all the delegates globally get together, and then the wealthy nations complain that the poor nations are like industrializing, basically. And so this one was a disaster. That was the outcome, because India, again, didn't commit to, some language that would have them reducing their emissions by a certain amount, because India, rightfully so, likes air conditioning.
Well, and they like toilets and things. They have a lot of things they need to build.
Electricity, and they like industrialization and sort of like being able to buy things and not dying and things like that. And so they're interested in that. And so the Western nations were completely distraught by this, because, that means that India's going to, consume more and more energy. And that was a terrible thing.
Yeah. I would say the title, the ultimate resource, the title is about how humans are actually better. The more humans, the better. And especially the more humans, the more innovation, because each person can think of ideas, and the ideas spread very easily and freely. So more people is better. It's better for everything.
I think the counterpoint I would have to that is that there's like certain geographical places and certain periods of time.
There's a short-term thing. Yeah,
innovation is very, very concentrated.
Oh yeah, there's certainly golden ages. Well, yes, it's not only it's
so it's
necessary
not average,
but not sufficient.
You can't average innovation.
Well, there was of course many. There were more people. Ancient Athens, had a golden age, but there were more people living in India in 400 BC or whatever. But
so why didn't they have the golden?
So
age?
Both books get into that. Is because policy plays a big role too. It's like, does the culture just reward conformists, or does it reward? Which for innovation, you just need ideas that are, ideas that are in conflict with each other, and ideas that compete, so that the best ideas rise to the top. That's really all it takes. Just Darwinian evolution of ideas. And often, because of government policy or because of culture, people decide to keep their new ideas to themselves. They feel embarrassed. They don't want to say what they really think.
Well, that doesn't make me optimistic that America is going to be a center of innovation right now, given the.
But don't you think America, relative to many? Well, it's it depends on. But we don't want. People can set a good example, like when Elon Musk lands the rockets right side up. But you can think all kinds of things about Elon Musk, but stuff like that is genuinely sort of inspiring to people. They look at that and they think, I didn't think that was even possible. And then they see that it actually happens. And then they're like, wow, maybe my weird idea for a new hit comedy show about whatever, silly things about my houseplants in my apartment is going to be great or something, So, they kind of, it goes in big waves. I agree. Yeah, there's a wave of optimism, novelty. So you have to do your part. It's like a zombie thing. You have to do your part to stay out of the evil team and join the good team, because you convert people back over. People are converting each other back and forth. It's way easier to be an innovator in a society of innovators.
So, I mean, leaving aside the sort of Miami boosterism, what parts of the U.S. would you say have a pocket of sort of actual intellectual innovation right now?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure. First of all, I've only been so many places around the world, right, that I've experienced firsthand. I would say maybe even give up on geography and just say the internet is better, because the internet, connects everyone. And without the internet, the Bitcoin community would have had a very, very, very hard time. Imagine if there was no Bitcoin talk, if there was no Reddit, if there was no Telegram, if there was no Twitter. We rely, Bitcoin people, us poor Bitcoin people are addicted to Twitter, but it helps everyone. You can just talk to anyone. But yeah, certainly Austin and Miami are doing very well, relatively speaking.
So actually, okay, so narrowing the question to the internet. So you're actually you're kind of a critic of Bitcoin development culture, I would say.
Yes.
That was actually one of my questions.
That's the important thing, is that we should always push for better ideas.
So, but this is what I wanted to ask, because in one sense, Bitcoin Twitter is fun, but in other ways, Bitcoin Twitter is a terrible place where people believe crazy stuff like stock to flow. So there's
many tragedies on Twitter.
I mean, there's an anti-intellectualism on there, not to claim that I'm intellectual or anything, but certainly there's a strain of anti-intellectualism.
Yes, that's an idea. This exactly as I said, but the culture can become static, where people can say things like Bitcoin is perfect the way it is, and its success is preordained. All we have to do is nothing, and Bitcoin will take over, and everyone will be so grateful to be paying $2,000 transaction fees, and then we'll have the Citadel and blah 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 blah. So we don't have to do anything to achieve that.
Maybe you're like our neo-Voltaire. Did you read Candide? So like you need to write the great satire and explain how that Bitcoin Leibnizianism is like, have the character of Pangloss.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I've actually thought about that idea with satire. I mean, like John Seth wrote that allegory with Christian or whatever. That was great. And Finding Bitcoin Mountain. Oh, it's like very obscure, but it was
I think I read that a long time ago.
All the great characters: Blythe Bruderin, inventor of the credit default swap, master of Ether or whatever. And there's like this the fork in the road, and it's like the difficult path of learning, and it's like.
I do. You know what? I did read that. I didn't know John Seth wrote it because it was just like a text that appeared.
Yeah, well, it was written by Blockchain Jesus.
Okay, and I didn't. Frankly, I was too new to these ideas. I didn't understand what the allegory.
Yeah, no, it's if you have no idea, if you don't understand that it's an allegory and that it's like what is it, like Christian Pilgrim's Progress or whatever it is. If you don't understand that it's it was
nonsensical.
It would just make no sense to you.
So
why did someone invest all this time?
We need. Maybe yourself, maybe like we can convince Josh Cincinnati to do it.
There should be a satire. Yeah, I think that actually would help a lot. There's a lot of material.
When your business is scaling up and your portfolio is growing, you don't want to waste precious time on manual crypto treasury management or settlement. Fireblocks can handle that for you with smart custody solutions for your crypto business, along with industry-leading security technology. Whether you're starting a new fund or expanding operations, Fireblocks offers scalable solutions for companies of any size. From day-to-day crypto transactions to the most advanced DeFi strategies, Fireblocks is here to give you a competitive edge. They'll take care of the back end so you can focus on the big picture. Visit onthebrink.link/Fireblocks to learn more. All right, so stock to flow, have to talk about it. I know I'm going to quote you. You said, "It's so dumb." It was so dumb that even critiquing it would have been too humiliating, like critiquing flat Earth or something.
Yes. Yeah. No, I completely believe that. When it first came out, I kind of thought it was just a harmless, like we had the Bitcoin wizard, like r/Bitcoin join us, and it was like an MS Paint, and it looked ridiculous, but it was like a joke. Exactly. It was like we don't care, but we secretly do care. It was like it was just like a meme thing. But I thought this was just like a thing that you could just say. Like, I couldn't believe that people actually thought that. I mean, what happened to supply and demand? What happened to efficient markets hypothesis? What happened to the fact that like Bitcoin Cash is the same stock to flow ratio? Like, what if you could fork Bitcoin and trivially alter the stock part, but the fork would have no value because it would have no demand. Like, every part of it made no sense at all.
Yeah. I mean, but they have answers for all these points. Like, there's something special about Bitcoin, which is why stock to flow doesn't work for altcoins. That's what they would always say.
But then that special thing has to be in the model somewhere. That special thing is called demand. For those of you listening,
that's an extra variable that's in there. It's the Bitcoin.
I mean, it's like it broke a number of statistical rules as well. They probably are so obscure that no one will care about. But you're not supposed to like. There was this big thing goes back to Fisher and these other things about when you fit parameters to the data, you're biased towards whatever data you have, and you can't just like. You could trivially like caring about R squared in a naive sense of just like it's really accurate if the R squared is high, but that's not true. The idea even that the accuracy of the model. The idea even that the model's predictive power or how well the data fits, the idea that is more important than the model structure being right, even that is false because, as I point out a lot, Ptolemy had this astronomical model that involved all these circles of circles, and it was all nonsense. None of it was correct, but the predictions were perfect because it was this overfit model that had degrees of freedom. And then when they proposed that planets go around the sun in a circle, the model was less accurate since they were like really ellipses and things, and there was like the gravity from Jupiter sometimes biases the, some of the other planets' orbits and things in these weird cycles. So often the model will become less accurate when it becomes the prediction, the numerical predictions can get worse, but the model itself will be more right.
But I feel like this critique is actually too sophisticated.
Right, that's what I mean. Exactly. It's like, what can you say?
If you start to talk about autocorrelation and
autocorrelation, it completely violates the regression the assumptions of normality of residuals, and like no one knows anything about it.
Yeah.
The real thing is that prices. We already had models of prices. It's supply and demand. Like the idea that the efficient markets hypothesis, and then what happened to the Austrian view that like the Hayek. The Hayek Mises view that they would represent signals of information or something that would be constantly changing over time.
Yeah,
that torpedoed like all of these really solid things, and so I don't know, but again, almost when you critique it, it almost gives it too much attention, it gives it more fuel.
Yeah, you're almost giving it validity if you're reacting to it with these abstruse econometric terms, and which basically nobody understands. And really the answer is just that this model is incredibly stupid and shouldn't exist. But yeah, so that stock to flow officially debunked. Yale statistician
I give it 2 thumbs down. I don't understand why don't people, there was nothing wrong with supply and demand, everyone. That was
good enough.
That's a real.
But it wasn't real model. It wasn't reducible to a single, formula.
Well, also, and then the wishful thinking, we're all going to get rich, and we just have to do nothing.
Okay, so we haven't even talked about the thing I wanted to talk about, which is basically the security budget and how it's insufficient, allegedly. So, all right, I'm going to give you some numbers right now. Right now, it's about $15 billion annualized. Does that seem sufficient? Is that too much? Is that too little?
Well, you include the block subsidy.
Correct.
Right. So,
yes.
I mean, the block subsidy, as we all know, is on a trajectory towards zero. It'll take a while, but it does. When you get cut in half every 4 years, being cut in half is very significant. And then the price has to be going up. I don't remember exactly what it is, but something like 17% annually on average or something. The price has to go up by 2 every 4 years.
Yeah.
To offset that. And the problem with that is eventually Bitcoin will just be worth, well, I know that this is, obviously this is a good problem to have, but eventually Bitcoin will just be worth all of the money, in the world. And then it cannot easily double in value relative to the stuff, it cannot easily double in value for the next 4 years. So like 8 years after that, the block subsidy is going down again.
Well,
the block subsidy is not a reliable, it's not like a sustainable thing to rely on. The fees have to go up.
So the fees, I also pulled the numbers. They are very low, frankly.
That's the most of the thrust of the article is about the fees. They're not on this magical upward trend.
No,
they're mostly zero most of the time. Sometimes during bubbles they rise, but then they go back down to there.
So we're going to link your articles. They do a better job of summarizing this, but so right now they're around $250 million annualized, which is sort of seems like a lot, but then again, you're trying to safeguard a network which is worth almost $1 trillion.
Yeah, if it's 250 million a year, then what is it per month? Like something like whatever, like 20 something million a month, and then like per like a week, we're chopping it down to like 5 million. It's like, so to 51% attack the network for like 3 days. It's going to cost you like whatever, like $2 million.
Bucks. Yeah. Well, assuming you can sort of get the ASICs and stuff. But yeah, so on Ethereum, here's the weird thing. Ethereum is $16 billion a year in fees. Right now.
The one site that when I presented at Bitcoin 2021, I pulled the numbers from whatever crypto fees.info or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And that's so sad. For this year, that's been...
Because there's individual smart contracts on Ethereum that are higher than all of the Bitcoin fees.
Well, it's just shocking to watch the trend over this year. Was that your graph? You had the greatest graph. I don't know if it was you, but I think it was. I think Austin gave it to me from you or something. The graph of Ethereum's fees versus Bitcoin's fees on the log scale.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's shocking.
Ethereum's a steady march upward, and now it's 80 times.
It's a diagonal line, and most importantly, the line starts at like 0.001 and it ends at like 50x or something.
More.
So it has crossed the crucial 1.0 horizontal, and it not only has it crossed, but it's just blown way past it. And that, I think that's a sad thing, because I try to focus, my background is in economics, and Adam Smith, he has this famous line about the conspiracy against the public, which is about guilds and things. Because Adam Smith he was a critic of the government and terrible mercantilist policy. But he also knew that the merchants and producers were not to be trusted as well. And he started sort of, I'm not sure who started it for, in a historical sense, but the idea that you have to care about the customer and the consumer. The customer is always right. And this idea of the fees is, it shows that these have users who pay money. So obviously the customer is being made happy in some way. That's certainly not the only criterion or whatever, but I do worry that, we want to keep the focus on what is best for the user. Like what would like Stallman say or something like that? People from the open source movement or the cypherpunk movement or whatever. It's like the software has to empower the user. So it should give the user what they want, and there should not be, the user's supposed to be sovereign.
So, all right. So we have this fee quandary, let's call it. They're either pretty high or effectively zero.
And they're only high when there's like these big price bubbles. So that's what really concerns me, is you have these people, they've been like investing like a couple weekends. They read everything by Nick Carter or whatever. They're getting ready to like become a Bitcoiner. So they've already invested an enormous amount of time. So when push comes to shove and the price is going up, they say, well, I'll just pay $50 or whatever. But then when they sober up weeks later or whatever, they kind of have more strategies about maybe they're not going to use on-chain as much. They keep the money on the exchange, or they switch from Bitcoin to, cheaper block space on other altcoins or something. So this really concerns me, the fact that what tricks people into thinking that the fees are going up is just these unrepresentative bubble periods.
Yeah. So, all right. So here's something. So I want to talk about this wait for more confirmations fallacy. I don't know if you call it a fallacy, but we can call it that. But firstly, I think that this year liquidity has been very portable across blockchains, thanks to certain things like, people primarily actually use stable coins to transact these days, as opposed to like your native crypto assets. And your stable coins are very busy straddling like dozens of different blockchains. And so it's relatively easy to go across chains now. So like if you look at Tether, like it started on Omni, and then it went to Ethereum, and then it went to Tron, and now you can use Tether on other blockchains too. If you look at USDC, I think it's on half a dozen blockchains. Like the liquidity is straddling blockchains. Is that does that accelerate the death of this idea that like liquidity is sticky on a blockchain? Is that evidence of like users having absolutely no allegiance to like a specific blockchain?
Well, one thing I try to make really clear in the piece, to the extent that I think I have like a few graphics about it or whatever, is that there's two different economic goods. Like the coin is very different from the Bitcoin layer 1 transactions, and they have a different price. There's only 21 million coins, but every 10 minutes on average there's a new block space that can accommodate layer 1 transactions. The Bitcoin layer 1 transactions are not like Lightning Network transactions or something. So that's yet a third category of thing. So people often try to make the argument about like, oh, Bitcoin is really special, people will pay. Well, a lot of that's true. They'll pay for the coin, but they won't necessarily pay for space in Bitcoin's blockchain. In fact, even when I was researching the article, I found that Satoshi said almost word for word that exact sentence or something. He said people may not want to shell out for the expensive space in Bitcoin's chain. In the thread where he invents merge mining, he casually adopts this view that there will be many different blockchains with different fee rates, and that the fee rates would drive people away from the more expensive small block decentralized chain. And so I was shocked to kind of...
We have to dig that up. That's some prime Satoshi exegesis.
Yeah. And he just kind of he's very, very nonchalant about that. He just sort of assumes, like, he takes it for granted. But today that would be a heretical view that block space on anything other than the one...
well, heretical among like a small crowd of Bitcoiners, but they're the minority. Frankly.
Yeah, we do have a problem where I think there is a loud minority on Twitter that unfortunately has a large influence on the culture. But what can you do? But anyway, what was your actual question? Oh, yeah, of course.
It's like, do users have allegiance to a blockchain?
Yeah, I think that, if they did, we would see more differences of fees on everything. But what we see really is that when the fees go up, new entrepreneurs just create more blockchains.
Yeah.
So it's a very much the same marginal cost equals marginal revenue argument from the proof of work article, where the marginal cost of making new block space that is apparently a good enough substitute is like basically zero, because they can always make some new chain with its own blocks. And so it's hard for the equilibrium price, not to be zero, because the supply curve is just
right. Because you can create abundant block space, and even worse, if you throw all your decentralization requirements out the window, you can create a ton of block space.
And the people who are transacting are not, holding, they're not hodling. So they may not be, they may want to make some transaction through some kind of crypto system, and they may want to end up with Bitcoin, or they may want to end up with US dollars in a bank account. And so since their final destination is not the coin, like all the darknet people, the darknet markets have they have switched to Monero. Many of them accept, I see, like the Pirate Bay accepts Bitcoin Cash or whatever. They had like Bitcoin Cash LOL or whatever, but then they had it. So, and then people have Litecoin. If you don't want to hold the coin and you only want to do the transacting part, and this is where I worry that people will ignore what I said before about the coin and the Bitcoin layer 1 transaction are very different things. So the coin is insulated from competition because it has unique network effects. People want to coordinate on one money. They do not want there to be all these different monies around. That's Metcalfe's law, blah, blah, blah. All that applies to the coin, but it does not necessarily apply to the Bitcoin layer 1 transactions, which are a completely different thing. And I think that if people really cared about one versus the other, you would see the prices be very, very different. But just how can it be the case now that, my question to people who believe that is, how can it be the case now that Bitcoin fees are like zero, like Litecoin fees are also zero, whatever it is, everything has this kind of natural zero resting place that everything returns to. So
it does. And even with Ethereum, fees are very material, but people are upset about the fees. Like it actually comes up in Congress.
And when they do, what happens? Someone makes a new
they move to other blockchains,
Smart Chain, Solana, whatever. They make the new whatever it is, Polkadot or something. That inspires people to take advantage of that situation.
So does that kind of suggest that actually fees are, especially as we have these like mononodal blockchains that like create tons of block space, fees are just destined to be zero across the board?
That's kind of what I think may be the case, because one thing think about this is, maybe you like Bitcoin Core and you like decentralization. Someone can just copy and paste Bitcoin Core and make, Bitcoin Core 2 or whatever, Beta, Charlie, Echo or whatever. They can just keep making these. And then that's even more decentralized because it has no historical blockchain. It could even have a smaller block size as far as anyone cares, because you just keep copying and pasting them. So what features, the only feature that the Bitcoin Core original would have is that it's the only thing that can move BTC, which of course that is significant. But again, it's not significant for anyone using it to transact. Anyone using it to transact, they won't be holding BTC at the end of the day to hold whatever else it is they wanted. And so that I think poses a challenge. The other thing is to say, like, everyone prefers one money, therefore BTC has an advantage. That's what they call circular reasoning, because BTC is on top right now. It has the network effect right now, but that's one of those things that's only true until it's not, right? As soon as something else is the biggest, then all of that advantage that you banked for your argument, now all of that becomes multiplied by -1 becomes a disadvantage, and your argument is now completely toast because it was 100% reliant on something that switched from being true to being false. So I think this problem is worth thinking about a little more. I think a lot of people just don't think about this problem for some reason.
Well, I think crypto people had this view that people would willingly use native crypto assets, like volatile native crypto assets. And I sound like an economist at the Cato Institute or something saying this, but like crypto people thought that people would do payments or like use crypto assets as a medium of exchange. And like basically that didn't materialize, in my opinion. Like it sort of did. You have like niche little economies and stuff. But like really, if you want to use a blockchain based asset for a contract with a non-zero duration, or you want to do your remittances or you round trip, you basically probably want to use a stablecoin, frankly. And if you just look empirically, like there's $150 billion of stablecoins, and their whatever velocity is very high. So that appears to be like the preferred transactional medium on blockchains. And so it already seems like this network effect thing is like, well, yeah, it's the dollar. The dollar is the thing that people want to use on blockchains.
If you're a network effect maximalist, then you're really screwed, because the US dollar, obviously, it's hard for Bitcoin to replace the US dollar in that, because the network effect is enormous. I think it's a conceit. Like, it's very easy for someone to just have their own little pet theory, and they think, well, the world's going to work out like this, and I'm going to get super rich along the way. And it's like, okay, but does it bother you at all that, anyone can do that, right? We have to, this graph of the fees, is, I think it calls out for explanation, that you'd think like, why are the Bitcoin fee rates like so low today? This should be, according to the people who say this is on a steady upward trend, this should be the highest ever every single day.
It shocked me, honestly, I'll admit that. So, all right, so before we get to the solution, this wait for more confirmations idea. So a lot of people say, well, it doesn't matter, the security budget is too low. We can just wait for more confirmations. Why is that false?
Yeah, I was surprised. Nick Szabo said this in particular, and I was surprised to hear that because, I don't agree with that. To me, the security budget that's equal to how much money we pay the miners. So that's all the money we pay to the miners. And so therefore, if you're a miner, if you're 100% of the miners, or all the miners as a group, that's all of your revenue. That's all of your income. So that's all the money, because of the way the difficulty adjustment works, but that's going to be like all of your costs. But your costs can't possibly be more than that. So that's the best case scenario. That's all the best case scenario is the entire security budget is translated to like hash rate security or something. That's like best case scenario, because you can't, if you're paying your gardener, $100 to, do landscaping on your house, it can't cost him $105, So that's all that we need. So that number is how much the miners spend, and if the miners spend, the proof of work, it is a totally, there's no identity. It's a dispassionate metric. It's this industrial number. So it's just like, measuring voltage or something. So anything that the miners do to defend the network, someone else could do to attack the network. And so to me, the security budget is just the cost of, attacking the network. Now, why isn't it, would more confirmations help? Well, I use security budget as like this dollars per month thing. So it's like a rate. Mm-hmm. To me, it has to be a rate, because that's just how it is in the real world. It's not like a certain amount of money we pay it, and then the miners hash, and then the miners never hash again or something. Like, it's just not what it is. So it's this ongoing rate. And yeah, whoever pays the rate has the longest chain. You know, they have the most proof of work, and that's what the software will use. And if you want the software to do something else, you open up your flank to like a million other arguments about how do you know that will work? Why didn't won't that be worse? And blah blah blah. So just ignoring that for the moment, whoever pays the security budget, that is what it costs to basically have the most proof of work and basically 51% Bitcoin permanently for as long as you're going to pay the rate. So you can just, if you're willing to pay whatever it is, like $1 million per day or whatever, which is like what it is now, then for as long as you are paying that, you're in control. And so what difference does it make how many they're not going to get any, the people on the real chain will never get any confirmations on the longest chain, so it won't make any difference. And then the other problem is, if the number is really low, then forget just having one person 51% attack the network like once or something. Like if this number is really low, like imagine if it cost 10 cents. Like the people who say this, like the people who aren't worried about the security budget, of which there are some people just reject this idea. But my question to them is, would it bother you if it would cost like 10 cents to rewrite the blockchain for like all of last year or something? Like, would that really, you would really just be completely zen about that? You wouldn't be worried about that at all? If the number is too low, people can easily attack the network like 7 or 8 times at once, like 100 times over or something. And then the whole proof of work part, that is the core element of the design, the proof of work part just sort of stops doing anything. It has no effect. So that's just over. It's just the end of proof of work. Which, if you've got some other great idea, then maybe you wouldn't be worried about that. But I think that's the idea. That's if you have a Bitcoin investment thesis or whatever, this is like a core part of what you're buying. So I find that kind of surprising. I wonder what those people would really say to that 10 cents to rewrite the blockchain for last year, if that would really not bother them at all.
So your point about this, you can't wait for more confirmations,
because it's a rate,
is because if someone is presumed to have an advantage and is an attacker, their advantage isn't necessarily decaying, right?
Yeah, they have an advantage. They'll beat every block. They will find the block before you.
Yeah.
So and then people try to say, well, we'll notice that it's an attack, and then we will, with our magic coordination powers, we will flag that one as the bad one, and then we have the magic bit, 0 or 1. We have the magic oracle bit, and we'll know that this one is bad. Even if you could do that, first of all, it doesn't make any difference, because they just restart the attack at the tip of whatever it is that you blessed with your magic powers. And they can just keep attacking over and over again forever. So you have to keep using this magical power over and over again. And that's really the whole point with the problem with the argument, is it just passes the buck to how are you doing this magic thing that is not the most proof of work rule.
Yeah, so you've introduced a new rule, and it's so you have a new parallel
rule. That is the new consensus.
Yeah. So then it's like the proof.
So if you have that, then great. Everyone in the world, including me, looks forward to hearing more about how that works.
Well, then we didn't need proof of work
in the first place
at all. Exactly. Yeah, it was the proof of stake people did the same thing. They're like, well, actually, what we're going to do is identify the bad people, and actually, we're going to slash them, and we're going to take away their money.
That doesn't work. I have to say, a lot of that's commonly believed, but I think that's dead. That's completely wrong.
That's ludicrous.
The attacker will go back. They'll go back to a time in history in the proof of stake chain where they control all the keys. They can easily do this in many ways by maybe buying the coin and then selling it, or going to people who used to own the coin and getting their keys that they no longer use, and which have no value to the present day owners. And when they rewrite the chain, they will control everything that's in it, including any evidence of any slashing and when they're in control of the chain, they can censor anything from it they like. So you won't be able to just broadcast your little thing that says that you're going to slash. They will be controlling whether or not that thing makes it into the blockchain. So I think that idea is substantially easier said than done. I think they won't be able to do that. In fact, they might come up with some kind of crazy convoluted way to maybe do it sometimes or something.
But it's just also I think it's just naive to build into your consensus mechanism a notion that there is some way to determine like intent in in a blockchain context, and like morality and things like that. Like this person is malicious and this person is good. Like what if a large exchange or custodian gets slashed? Then they'll just lobby the developers to be like, don't slash me.
Refuse to list the other blockchain history, So the thing is I think, we've all got our views, but of course the proof of work, what makes it so great is it's a simple rule that everyone can calculate, and it does not involve these ideas of morality that require enormous amounts of context and things.
Basically, people need to read their Szabo, unless he is talking about this.
I don't know why he jumped on that quickly, but that was like very quickly before he got like banned from Twitter or whatever happened.
Was he banned?
I think he like quit or something. I think what's possible is he made a couple tweets on some sensitive topics, let's just say, I think, and then what they sometimes do is they say, if you don't delete this tweet, you won't. And I think he's become a little stubborn in those particular political views, so he's becoming a little curmudgeonly.
They want you to do your struggle session. They want you to put on like the dunce cap.
Like, I'm not doing that. That's my guess. I don't know.
They want you to basically be like the Chinese peasant or whatever, and wear your placard saying like, I've sinned, I repent, like I'm sorry. And
it does not. The number of confirmations does not matter. If they're paying more than you per month, no amount of confirmations you will never have any in the longest chain of any. You have zero. And then the worst thing is, of course, if the attack is overwhelming in its success, that's a big if. But if the attacker really can pay the security and is willing and able to pay, then all the honest miners will be earning nothing. So they will eventually, become discouraged, and then that will be a disaster because the security budget will then plummet, and it will be very easy to keep the attack going, although they'll always need to be willing and able to pay the larger number to be a deterrent, but they won't actually have to pay it. They'll just need to be willing and able to pay it, and that would be horrible.
So we haven't really actually talked about BIP 300, and I feel like BIP 300 is too narrow because you have like a sort of a cluster of ideas, and you were telling me you first presented this in 2015. Is that right?
I had this idea, Drivechain, which is just an idea in 2015 November, and then over time it has actually become to make it into just easier to understand and for code reasons, I split it into two BIPs, BIP 300 and BIP 301. But BIP 300 is basically this sidechains idea that hash rate escrows, this SPV proof code idea, and the 301 is blind merge mining. So I thought it'd be easier for people to read. It makes the BIPs a lot shorter. So you can read, if you're into reading about BIPs, like the actual BIPs are, of course, in the Luke Dash Jr. controlled BIP repository in the little table. So you can read those, and each is only half as long because I split them into two.
And what's your sort of current attitude in terms of the process of including these?
This is a thing where they're determined to you just look at the frequency has been decreasing of like soft fork upgrades, but just also of like any kind of major release of any kind it's become very rare. It's become literally like 4 or 5 years in between soft forks. Whereas in the past there were very many. In 2015 there were like three like the same month of scaling 2 or something, like that had been done before, and there were like 5 that year or something like that. There used to be many more. There used to be more upgrades, but now, which is partially a good thing, the protocol has ossified to some extent, but also there's this kind of very bureaucratic, slow consensus building process. And if you can't, it's a good thing. You want to be able to demonstrate that, nothing that you add to Bitcoin in terms of code or whatever, that should never affect any of the people who aren't using it, which is great. Although that rule was broken for SegWit since it was a mandatory block size increase. But the point is that is the criterion. But not only do you have to meet that criterion, which is great, but you have to have some kind of like overwhelming ability to persuade everyone that you really have met the criterion. And plenty of people will just like, they're really busy with what they're doing, and they'll just not, they'll just like sort of not look into whatever argument you make that this will not affect people who aren't using the software. You've even said things like you could have a different version of Bitcoin Core that doesn't have any BIP300 code in it at all, and that version will work just the same as you won't be able to use sidechains on that version, but it will work just the same. But people are kind of like, it takes effort for everyone to understand every argument. So you look at Jeremy Rubin is suffering through this right now. His thing is a very simple repurposing of one of the opcodes, which has been done many times before. If your transaction doesn't use this opcode, it will never trigger any of his code or whatever. But still, this has led to this long conversation about who affects what and who thinks what and why. It becomes anyone can just comment, and so the process has become very, very, very slow. I'm not sure I actually know how to what the strategy is for actually succeeding anymore. It may even be the case that it may just like not even be possible. A lot of people for Taproot, they were like, I'll code Taproot, but they were like, but I don't want to have anything to do with the activation. They just intentionally like fell on the sword or whatever with that, and they were just like, this is like, because it was so traumatic. This scaling war and SegWit and all that other stuff
it's been so long. You'd think that sort of our PTSD would be, we'd like go to therapy and sort of like fix that.
You would think that, or that we would, this is a crazy idea. You would think that maybe you would think that we would like come up with a solution to make it easier to like have the process more formal, or have something about procedure, we figured that out with the law. Like that's why the law has all these silly things: arraignment, trial, jury selection. We figured out that it's a big mess if you don't have like a plan.
That was sort of there was so much bellyaching over Taproot, but we eventually did settle on a method of sorts. I think it was the first time we did it in this sort of specific way. I don't know exactly. It was like
some people have a problem with the way. I mean, I didn't, but like Luke Dash Jr. had some kind of problem with how it was done or whatever. I mean, so it's tough. It's difficult. I think it is hard to get things. It's very bureaucratic, and the whole point of sidechains is that you could one of the points is that you could let layer one ossify safely and still take advantage of everyone's creative screwball ideas. So if the protocol is going to ossify, it would have been really, really nice to ossify with BIP300 in it, or something that does what BIP300 does. That would be great, because then the ossification is no longer a liability, because the idea of becoming obsolete that would be horrible to the network if there was something that, again, the users, we had to focus on the users and the customers. It's a very common thing to have contempt for the user and to insist that that maybe the developers are the technical people are the philosopher kings and they should rule over everyone. But I do not accept that view. I think the user is ultimately going to get what they want. If you don't give the user what they want, then you're going to become a problem for the user. And people are just very smart. They're very good at solving their problems eventually. Maybe not the next day, but they will eventually get what they want. And if they want stupid, like we had like all kinds of, remember we had Counterparty, we had colored coins, we had Omni, we had all this like NFT style stuff.
Yeah.
And, if the people just want CryptoKitties or whatever, and they're willing to pay and they're willing to invest their time and energy in that, and and it doesn't bring any harm to the people around them, then that's the direction society is going to go. And same for anything they want, like more privacy. Like Monero, there's a darknet market that went Monero only, and then they made so much money that they closed down, I think, without exit scamming everyone.
Yeah, I think I saw that. That was like a first almost. It was like they just peacefully exited. They're like, we're actually not going to exit scam I was like, wow, this is so wholesome.
Very, very rare.
It's like they sort of like did it, they met their goal, and they're done.
But this kind of really makes it look like exactly right. Like, and they did that and they by being Monero only. They had a plan, and they wanted the privacy feature, and they succeeded, and they met their goal, like they retired or whatever. And
probably live in Miami now. Probably saw them on my run this morning.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. As like as not.
So okay, but so blind merge mining, is there an instance of it in Bitcoin today or something similar?
You could easily do it. What BIP.280 does is it makes blind merge mining not require any trust between someone running the sidechain full node and the layer 1 SHA-256 hashers that we think of as miners today. So the idea of blind merge mining, you could do it without BIP.280 today very easily, in fact, because people could have a relationship with a pool or something. They could just have like a pay as you go, like if you had if you leave someone a bushel of oranges at a certain pier and then you come back and they pay you and then you just do this every day. You wouldn't really, but the BIP.280 makes it atomic. You get the cash at the exact same moment you leave the oranges or whatever. So there is no example. I mean, anyone could be doing it, is my point, without BIP.280. BIP.280, we have testnet software that uses it. So the software exists. The software works. You can check it out at drivechain.info if you want. But I don't think anyone has deployed it except for me. I don't know. I don't know that. If you have, let me know, because I don't know anything about that. But has been a lot of regular merge mining in Bitcoin since I think 2010, 2011.
Right, and that's also a Satoshian idea.
He invented that idea to help out Namecoin. This is another thing that is very different. Satoshi is like the co-inventor of the first altcoin or whatever. So this is very like bizarre. We've come a very long way. I think, even Satoshi would not be allowed to appear at like a Bitcoin conference, if you only saw his resume, because his resume would include like inventing like a shitcoin. So he would be like barred, because people enforce, like, I don't want to particularly name, I mean, you probably know the conferences I'm thinking of, but the conferences, they have a policy, sometimes a formal policy where the organizers of the conference have said on recorded YouTube videos or whatever, they say if anyone has anything to do with any altcoins, especially, God forbid, they created it, helped create an altcoin, they would not be allowed to, but then that would, by that criterion, narrowly applied, they would have to prevent him from, speaking at the conference. So that's like, I don't know what to make of that. I mean, that's just the thing, like, people don't realize that the plan is, the problem of altcoins is you don't want anyone, it dilutes the message. We had, in the past, we had this message like Bitcoin versus the banks. And altcoins wreck the message and they make it like confusing. And every altcoin is kind of like, as Gavin Andresen said long ago, kind of a sneaky way of getting around the 21 million coin limit. But the problem of to solve the problem of altcoins is not to just go around and try to suppress people's creativity and people's interests and desires and things. The problem, the solution, which was like part of what Satoshi was doing when he invented merge mining in 2010, the solution is to try and come up with something that where you get all the benefits of having the altcoin, but you don't have this dilution of, this inflation tax, and you don't have this dilution of the message, like to the point where people today, they've heard of Bitcoin. They heard of Bitcoin last week, and they heard of Solana last week, and they're completely indifferent between the two, and they have no idea what the differences are. You want to have the genesis of all of that thought was in 2013, the two-way peg, or in 2014 became the sidechain, and that was supposed to be just this big solution, and that's what I and many other people thought would be the solution to the problem of altcoins, is that you can just take all of the, if you have Zcash or Monero or Namecoin or whatever it is, whatever it is that people are interested in, NFTs, Turing complete, smart contracts. You would just, like, I remember Rootstock, that was super old. That was like 2015 that they were announced or something. And they were like, we're just going to copy Ethereum and put it on Bitcoin.
Well, it's operational now, Rootstock, right?
Yeah, but they haven't quite succeeded in their mission to, like, you know what I mean? Like, how much activity is there on Ethereum versus Rootstock, you know?
Well, that's because I think people, like, if you just, like, look out there in the world, like, all the potential, you know, users of a blockchain, it's just a lot of people don't care about using Ethereum on Bitcoin. They're just fine using Ethereum.
Yeah.
They don't have any ideological hang-up.
But that would never have happened, like, you know, before 2016. Remember, before 2016, Ethereum was like, you know, was like whatever, like 4% of Bitcoin or something. It was like this very, very small thing. And then, so this was when the genesis of the sidechain idea happened. Ethereum was like this tiny, tiny, tiny little thing. And then it wasn't until 2016 when Ethereum kind of like 100x'd in value or something, and like became like worth like a third of what Bitcoin was worth or something. And there was like all this drama in Bitcoin about the scaling war, the block size war, knowing people like the future was uncertain. It was like stress. It was like miserable.
Yeah, it was tough. So, okay, so does BIP 300/301 solve this problem of our weak security budget?
Well, I think it would. I mean, I don't know what else would, because the issue is merge mining for the purposes of the security budget is like the unlimited block size increase.
Right.
It lets you collect all the fees from other blockchains, all of them, without limit, without any inconvenience really to you. And that's regular merge mining does that. So just regular merge mining, I think, could solve this security, but even without 301. 301 just makes it very, very easy, because 301 lets regular miners merge mine everything that's 301 like compliant or whatever, without even doing anything, like without running any full nodes of sidechain or altcoin. So you can have a 301 merge mine, blind merge mined altcoin, and it could have all these fees. And what happens is the fees are paid to someone over there, some user over there who happens to also have Bitcoin, and they make a transaction on Bitcoin to the miners. They like a kind of just a sacrificial transaction. They pay like whatever it is, like let's say the sidechain has like $700 worth of transaction fees, and they would pay on layer 1. They pay with BTC $699 to the miners, and in exchange the miners like include some little code that mines the block, so they get $700 in the world of the other chain, and the miners just see that they just got $699 in exchange for including a transaction, basically for including data in the blockchain. And so as far as they're concerned, this is just a weird transaction that pays them $700. This one transaction that pays them all the sum, the amount that is the sum of all the fees. Of the other block. So that's just, they're not doing anything they don't already normally do, which is just include all the transactions in the block that pay them the most money.
Right.
So 301 just makes it so they don't have to think about anything at all or do anything, and they just get paid on layer 1. So 301, I think, is it makes life a lot easier. Whereas with regular merge mining, they have to actually run the software of the weirder altcoin, like or layer 2 or whatever you want to call it. Like they have to run Namecoin, and then like Namecoin will like make a Namecoin block that also is a Bitcoin block that when you hash the Bitcoin part is a really low hash or something like that. So you're beholden to like this weird, the weird new experimental software.
And you as a miner,
that's kind of annoying.
Like miners, we know are like pretty lazy and don't
want to
update
upgrade.
Their software
You said who wants? I mean, who even wants to upgrade their normal computer? Like the thing pops up and they're like, "Oh, a bunch of people did work for you," but you're like, "I never." Whoever wants to update their computer at all? Who wants to update their phone? Who wants to update anything? So the miners, especially, like they're making an enormous amount of money, like per second. They have it all charted out. They can. What's funny is that the Namecoin software, merge mining, they would get like $5 like per block, and then the Bitcoin block was like $5,000, and they would still like half the network, 50 would merge mine, and sometimes the Namecoin software would crash, and like they would like, you know, the whole mining farm would like go down as like their software reset or whatever, and I think even once or twice there's just so much voltage that if it doesn't go into the ASICs, like it literally, like transformers, like it burst into flames and explode or something. Like I'm not 100% sure that really happened, and it's not just a story that someone told me.
Might be a story, yeah. All right. So one thing I forgot to ask you before about security budget. Okay, so I think we probably differ on this. Why can't you just contract the block size and target a certain amount of revenue by doing the OPEC thing and cartelizing?
Probably do, because what's the problem with that is, so this is like, you know, just like the fee rate is like the price, and then the fees, the thing that I'm focused on is like the revenue. So it's price times quantity. So it's this area of this square in economics, or this rectangle in economics of the price times quantity. And yes, if you reduce the quantity, let's say you cut the quantity, you know, to a tenth, you cut it by an order of magnitude, and instead of being, right now it's 4 megabytes, you cut it to 400 kilobytes. You would then, immediately, your problem becomes 10 times harder. So that if the price doesn't change, which of course you and I agree that it would, but I'm just saying step by step. The first thing that you did is you just made the entire problem 10 times worse. So you have to hope that the fees go from whatever they were to something that's 10 times higher just to get back to where you started.
Well, you need convexity, right? Like,
yes.
Or I don't know if that's the right shape of the curve.
I always get them confused, you know, actually. It's funny. I think you do. I think convexity is right, though.
You need the price to go up by more than you reduce the quantity of block space, right?
Right. So you need the price to go, the delta on the price, the multiplier of the price to go up by a factor of more than
10
in that example.
So you just don't believe that would happen.
Well, first of all, now, the problem is the logic I outline in the piece is that when the price is really, really high, the idea of focusing on the high P, that creates, that means that each transaction is expensive, just straightforward. But that means that whenever anything is expensive, we just talked about the whole Simon Ehrlich thing too. Whenever something's expensive, it's a problem for the user, to the tune of however expensive it is. And most things have just, as we were talking about before, they just get cheaper over time. And a lot of things today on the internet are just free. And so I would imagine like it would be tough to hit these levels you would need to hit. I mean, think about what you would need to hit to replace, if you wanted fees to replace the block subsidy today, the math on what is required to hit that is like, we're talking like $200 per transaction. We're talking like, and if you're cutting it, it depends on what you cut it by. We're talking like numbers that people would find genuinely inconvenient. If you're going to cut it by 10, you have to go 10 times higher than that just to get back to where you started, let alone to make it increase. So I'm not sure that, I think there is really kind of like a limit. Like I think that maybe there's because again, we're talking long run, 24/7, 365 fees. So right now it's like 2,000 transactions per block. And we're talking like what's the average price going to be in the long run future? That are people really going to pay $50 every time, $2,000 2,000 times every 10 minutes?
Yeah.
At 3 a.m. At like whatever. Like, this is the future, like forever? And then the other problem is our adversaries, JP Morgan, whatever, whoever you want to name, like the crazy people in the Russian government or the Chinese government or the U.S. government or whoever you want to name as the people who may not have their interests completely aligned with Bitcoin, whoever they are. Their profitability is going to be growing at a geometric rate. I calculated a lot of figures in the article. Most of them, like, I had like the U.S. military budget, like visas, operating profits. I had all those things. Most of those things just happen to be growing by like around 6% per year, just like a back of the envelope calculation. Okay. Like for all of the historical data that was like available. So they're just going to be growing all the time. So now $50 fees, are people going to pay that in 2075 or something? And then it needs to be going up and up and up and up over time. And in the real world, you have things like, what about, there was a time before Venmo, right? There was a time before Litecoin. There was a time before Bitcoin Cash. There was a time before Solana competing on keeping the fees down. So I think it's tough. I think it's tough to rely on the high P. I think that's the high price. I think you're really putting yourself at a big risk if you do that. And so I think it's better to just say that the prices will probably always be low and you have to make it up on volume, as they say. What people don't understand is that because it's a violation of the block size limit as far as mining revenues are concerned. But it is not at all. I can say this is the author of the Measuring Decentralization post or whatever. It has nothing to do with how expensive it is for you to run your full node and fully validate the blockchain. It has nothing to do with that at all. And that is the missing piece that people get. They think that merge mining makes it more expensive for them to run a node or something. It does not. Blind merge mining definitely does not, because even the miners don't need to run. It's possible for the whole system to be running without people knowing what altcoin or sidechain nodes are even being used to create these fees in the first place. It's always possible that your blockchain will reorg or that miners will decide to do something crazy, but that has nothing to do with the presence or absence of merge mining. And in fact, if there is no merge mining, I really worry that the security budget will be very low, and that problem is 1,000 times more important than the fact that you may not like the fact that some miners have a side hustle where they earn money or something, right. Or the fact that some miners would have the side hustle and some won't, and then some miners will go out of business, and so we should shed a tear over the fact that those miners can't buy as many Christmas presents for their kids or something. It's like, mining is an evolutionary process, and it is we want it to be really simple. Whoever does the most hashing is the winner. They provide the most security per Bitcoin, layer 1 block or whatever, and that's what we want.
Okay, I think we have to leave it there. We basically covered everything I wanted to talk about. What would you instruct our dear listeners in order to, subsequent instructions? Where would you send them?
Well, I think the security budget is a really good window into my brain and how I do things. And again, it is just a giant list of things where I disagree with what most Bitcoiners believe, and I try to say why that is. And I think that one is a big tour of all of my heretical thoughts. So I think if you go into that, you'll find there's just so much in there, especially when you make it down to the bottom, all the stuff about the history of blind merge mining and people's attitudes toward it and things. I have lots of links and stuff in there. So I think if you liked any of that, you might like the article. I did put a lot of effort into writing it, and I think that's a good idea of what kind of stuff that I'm up to. And then you can just go, that's on my blog, and you can just click the latest post or the archive button, and then you can see other stuff there that you might want to read. If you're interested in BIP 300 or 301, you would go to drivechain.info, and hopefully the best thing is to download the software, because don't listen to, you can make up your own mind. Just download the software and use it, and then you'll know more about BIP 300 than anyone who hasn't. You have to trust yourself, your own experiences. You're a smart person. You'll figure it out. I believe in you. We have real software that you can download, and I would do that. That's awesome. The only best way to understand.
So I will. I'll link to all these things. I'd certainly recommend that. You have two security budget posts. I think.
Right. Yeah. I wrote the first one. I thought it was quite good, and then there was a lot of pushback from it. So I was oh, and then I had to write the second one.
But yes, read the whole corpus of the truthcoin.info. Read the archives. It's probably the number one thing I recommend to people if they can handle the iconoclasm they're in. But yes, I'm going to put it all together. Paul, thank you for coming on the show. It's been 3 years almost, maybe 2 years of doing this show. Never had you on, so thanks.
No, hey, thanks for having me.